they know that product design is not what they are teaching. So my question is, if you became a product designer through a very different way, why are you sort of teaching product design in a completely different way than the way you learned?
So probably some people will drop in later on as well. Let's just get started with today's session. Thanks again, Chetan, for joining. For everyone that doesn't know Chetan is a product designer currently living in Berlin, Germany. He's working at Trade Republic. Before he worked at Apple and Yun Academy, if I'm saying that right. But he also, besides doing that, he also runs a YouTube channel called Design Pilot, teaching product motion and Webflow design. He also speaks at conferences. I've seen a couple of blogs from him. So a pretty busy designer as well. Not only designing, but also teaching design, talking about design a lot. So yeah, thanks, Chetan, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, really excited to have you. You're currently working at Trade Republic.
Yes.
What are you doing there?
So yeah, I'm on the growth team, which means I handle everything right from onboarding, which is not easy because we have a very strict onboarding with a bunch of screens, multiple geographies, a lot of edge cases, citizenships, countries. We have a lot of things to handle. So apart from that, I take care of the first-time user experience. So activation is my thing, getting users activated. And then we have onboarding perks, we have referrals, everything that involves making a customer go from just signing up on the app to becoming an active user. That's what I handle, which is quite a lot of work, a lot of projects and a lot of tasks to do. It's not easy as well, very data driven. We focus on metrics quite a bit. So yeah, that's what I handle.
Yeah. So that's quite some different things that you have to do at your job already. Besides that, of course, you're doing your YouTube channel, right?
Yes.
For how long have you been doing that?
So YouTube, I started it almost 6 years back. But it wasn't a very big deal back then. I just did it because it was quite fun and everybody was doing it at that time. I was making a lot of After Effects and Photoshop tutorials back then. I wasn't a product designer. But then once I started working at an academy and my career took off, I started then teaching product design. I took a break for 2 years while I was at Apple because Apple does not allow anybody to make any content or talk about design publicly. They're like super strict. So I was off YouTube for 2 years. And when I came here to Berlin and joined Trade Republic, I started making content again. So yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. You said that you didn't do product design before. What got you to make the switch and jump into product design?
That's a good question. So I actually studied accountancy. So I was working to become an accountant, which is a very big deal in India. But design was something that I was doing ever since I was in like college and also making YouTube. So it was always a hobby. Never wanted to make it full time because I didn't know you could make it full time. But then one day I got to attend a conference, and that's where I actually discovered product design in its essence. I think it was still picking up in India at that point in time. I think it was 2017, 16, 17, around that time. And when I then understood the power of this profession, the value that we provide to companies and why the world even needs product designers, I decided that, okay, you can become a designer without any qualification. You just have to have the skills, and then you can even get into FANG companies, any of the big companies that you want. So that's when I decided that I think I want to take a product design. So yeah, so I was always a designer, but not really a product designer. But then it was when I attended the conference, I decided that, okay, this is what I want to do. So, and then I just started learning everything and transition.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. And I took a look at your website, of course, and there I saw that you don't only do, of course, product design, but also web design, motion, also quite a lot of visual design. I saw some interesting visual things going on there as well. So it seems like you're trying to master all of those aspects.
Yeah, I like doing it. I think every time you learn a new skill, it just makes you a stronger designer. Not every You don't have to be specialized in one thing all the time. As a product designer, that's my core competency. That's what I get paid for. That's my job. But then it's important to have a lot of other skills as well. So yeah, I mean, I picked up a lot of these as I started. When I was in college. So it started off with I even was doing a lot of filmmaking and short films, and I think that's where it all started, and I started picking up one skill at a time. And yeah, I just like to create a lot of things. I like to put in that time and effort, and then make something amazing come out of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, this project itself that I launched was quite a complex task. It's like, it's not a website, it's a big product itself. So I need to think about marketing and promotion, and then payments and updating, and then customer service, emails, and all of those things. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's not just making a course, right? It's
Yeah.
it's all everything around it, which actually is quite some work. So let's talk a little bit about it, right? About
Yeah.
the thing that you just launched, because that's
Mhm.
why we are having this
Yeah.
session and diving a little bit into that. It's called Learn Product Design,
Yeah.
and the first thing I thought when I saw it was like, or when I heard it, I was like, whoa! But there are so many resources out there already,
Yeah.
on product design. So my
Yeah.
first question is, what did you make think of this concept, and why do you think this you had to create this course?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. This was something that I was thinking about for a very long time. So I'm a self-taught designer, which means I've never been to design school, never done any certification and things like that. And I learned everything while working, figuring out a lot of things on my own. And it does require a lot of time and effort. And I was very passionate about it, so I did it. And I've been a designer for almost 4 years now. And I'm very closely connected with the design community in India. I see what's happening across the world, and I see what everybody's doing and things like that. And one of the biggest problems that I see today is the unrealistic way of learning product design, incorrect ways of teaching, talking about irrelevant things that is not what product designers really do on a day-to-day basis. The outside world works very differently compared to what you see online, and that is something that I wanted to change. I, of course, don't have the time and energy and resources to pull off a boot camp. I could have done it, but it's too hard, and I have to go all in. So rather than making a course as such, and like you said, right, I didn't want anybody else to feel like it's another course. And in reality, it is not a course as such. Um, it's more of a framework that you can pick up and learn. A lot of the tutorials that I have are there on YouTube, and then there are a lot more nuanced things that I talk about in the guide. And it's not about just going online and reading a couple of things. Sometimes there's a strategy and a way to learn these things. And I think what I focused on very much when making this is the most practical and realistic thing, something that comes very close to what product designers really do in their job. Like if I were to take an example of, let's say, the Google's certification course, it's not that it's bad, but it's missing out on a lot of things that real designers in companies actually work on. We do a part of it, but Google sort of put it out saying that this is product design, which
Mhm.
it is not. And I've seen a lot of people who have been demotivated. They have put in all their savings to attend these boot camps and courses, and then I hear a lot of sad stories. People are stuck, they don't know what to do, right? So solving this problem was my main goal, and it took me a lot of time to figure out how do I do it. So that's how it all started. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting, because I I feel like a lot of people that only start out with doing these courses or learning these courses, or watching videos, get the idea that design at companies is this perfect process and
Yes.
framework, right? And it's just
Yep.
going to be exactly the same as the thing that you learned. And most of the
Yep.
times it's not that at all,
Yeah.
right? It's a completely different thing. So where do you think, because you also touched upon this, where do you think the biggest disconnect sits between what you learn in, for example, the Google lessons and the real life design element?
Yeah, I think the biggest disconnect I have seen is the people who are actually teaching in these boot camps and people who are making these courses. I think that although they are still product designers, and it's not that I'm not trying to put down anybody or anything like that, I just feel that they aren't very much in touch with what's happening in the real world. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But I mean, the one thing that confuses me a lot is those who teach, make these courses, right? They know that product design is not what they are teaching. So my question is, if you became a product designer through a very different way, why are you sort of teaching product design in a completely different way than the way you learned? Why don't you teach design the way you learned it, and why don't you teach design that made you the designer?
Yeah.
Right? That is the biggest question I've always had. And then the answer is quite straightforward. As a business, there are certain ways to make money and certain ways to grow a following, so you do what's needed, right? I'm friends with a lot of people who are content creators themselves, who have these courses, and we discuss and talk about this quite a bit. So that's the thing. I mean, I never wanted, this project was not to make a lot of money. I made some amount of money, but it's not like I made lots of money and I can, live off that. But it was more of this internal responsibility. I feel like I have all the knowledge, I have the skill, I have the resources, I know I can teach well, so let me do my best. Right? I think that's where it came. Yeah. Also, the other disconnect I would see is that there are a lot of designers that I know who are great, but they lack the skill of teaching. And it's not that it's a bad thing, it's just that they don't know how to teach.
It's a different skill set.
Yeah, it's a
Right.
different skill set altogether, right? So I think that's also something that's lacking. And I think the final thing I would say is the big gap. The big gap is the expectations of what people who enter this profession think what product design is. I think most of the content online is very misleading and incorrect. And I think, and seeing all these influencers talk about, I know a lot of people who come to me and say, do I need to learn prototyping to become a product designer? I'm like, it's a complex question to answer. I can't say yes, I can't say no. Yes, you need to know prototyping, but that's barely like 2% of your work. There's a lot more that goes on to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said about it's strange that what you see a lot is that people are teaching product design in a way where the way that it's taught is almost over designed, right? It's this perfect process from start to finish. But for example, if I look at myself, I learned product design really through doing, right? And just jumping into it and experimenting. And that's also always what I recommend people doing. Instead of doing a year long of courses or reading books, just jump into it and start making your first mistakes as early as possible, right? Because that's the best way to learn it. So I think that's very interesting. So for who did you make the course? Is it really for people that want to get into product design? Is it for people that are already in product design but want to become better?
Yeah, I think it's for, the way I put across the entire message was that if you are a product designer, or if you want to become a product designer, or whoever you are, if you believe that there are a lot of gaps in your skill set, it could be UX design, it could be visual design, it could be UI design, it could be understanding the technicalities, it could be problem solving. It doesn't matter how many years of experience you have, doesn't matter whether you're in college, doesn't matter who you are. If you feel that there are gaps, I will help you fill these gaps, so that when you are ready to present yourself to the world, and what that means is when you are ready to go to interviews and apply for jobs, you should be in the top 10 to 20 people in their entire list, right? You shouldn't be in the top 100, you should be in the top 20. That's the objective. And the thing is, there are very few companies across the world which are great companies. Most of the companies are still immature companies, they're still growing, they don't have a design team, right? So there are chances that you might be working in one of these companies and you might not get to actually work with great people, you might not get to work on great products, you might not get good feedback. So there are going to be gaps in your skill set. So I still get a lot of questions that people ask me, hey Chetan, I have 3 years of experience, can I still take up this course? And my answer is, it's not about experience. Do you feel you're lacking in a lot of skills? And whatever those skills are, I will cover that and teach you the framework to fill those gaps appropriately. So that's the way I would put it across.
Yeah, sounds good. And you talked about, being in that top 5% or that top percentage, of people that are in the list, for example, when new companies are hiring. What
Yeah.
are the skills you would say that would bring you to that top 5%?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a simple answer and a complex answer. I think the simplest answer is first and foremost, your UI design skills need to be pretty good. I'm not saying you need to be the best UI designer in the world. I'm saying that if somebody gives you a screen which is probably ugly, or somebody asks you to design a screen, you need to be able to design a realistic screen. Well, that's the basic, which means your colors, your font sizes, typography, that should be sorted. Like, there's no excuse to not knowing that today, at least. When I started out a couple of years back, I was still learning. There weren't many resources. Design Pilot did not even exist because he was learning design.
Yeah.
But now you don't have excuses to not know good UI design anymore. There are plenty of resources. So that
But
is what.
it's interesting that you start about with that, actually, because
Yeah,
I feel like in most boot camps and product design
correct.
courses, that's where the least amount of effort goes to, right? It's all
Yes.
about the research, solving the right problem,
Yeah.
but getting to that finished product. And that's also a big reason why I started 10x Designers, is
Yeah.
because of that less 10%. If you're
Yes.
able to execute it in an original and a high quality way, then you're already so far ahead of other designers, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, one thing that I see people don't understand is that they look at UI as something that can be learned as a hobby or on the side, right? They feel like UX is, I need to give all my focus to that, and then UI is something that I can learn on the own. But the interesting thing is that if you end up becoming a good UI designer, you will automatically learn that ability to solve problems, because UI is not just, like putting together, like attaching a charger to your phone. It requires a lot of thinking. It
Yeah.
requires a lot of problem solving, because you solve problems with UI as well. But the thing is, people don't know that because there's not enough exposure and people don't talk about it. So that's the thing.
I
Um,
even think it gets separated too much.
yes,
I
yes,
don't
it
even
does.
look at it as UX and UI. For me, it's just product design, right?
Yeah,
And you even have you have a good product or a bad product. And for me, it all ties together. You can't really separate it completely.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I still haven't found a complete boot camp for product design which focuses on UI. I've still not found that ever.
Mhm.
Shift Nudge is Matt is doing a good job, but he's focusing core UI. He's not teaching product design as a whole. But
Yeah.
then it would be pretty nice to see somebody who teaches UI also very well in product design. So yeah.
So let's go back about the framework that you created. Learn product
Mhm.
design. When did you start creating it, and how did you start it? How do you go about creating a project like that?
Honestly, it's so I started. So the thing was, ever since I was working in Apple, I was always thinking about it. I never did anything. I never made notes. I never started designing. It was always something that I kept thinking about all the time. And I would talk to my friends and ask them, "Hey, what do you think of this? Do you think this makes sense?" I would always get feedback. Like throughout the project, I've taken so much feedback from a lot of people before launching, and I've taken feedback from people who are better than me, people who are as good as me, and people who I'm catering to. I've taken feedback from a lot of people and try to see where this goes. So I think I started working on it the moment I came to Berlin, which is around 6 months ago. It took me a while to just settle into my company, settle into the country. But then I think I started actually working on it 4 months before. So I would say that this project has taken me 4 months completely to put together. I think the first one was I knew what the vision was, but I didn't know what the end result is. At the beginning, I wanted to make it like an ebook. But then I felt that ebook isn't scalable. I can't fix it. I can't make changes. I can't make it better if something went wrong. And I just felt there were a lot of issues. So that was one thing. I was still thinking about how do I do it. The second one was, should I make it like a video course, or should I make it written, or should I have like a combination of both? That was also something that I was thinking about quite often. So that was something that I kept thinking on my mind. But then what I started doing was putting together the course structure. What am I going to teach? What are the chapters that are going to be? What is it that people want to learn? I'm very active on my Instagram account, and a lot of people follow me there. They ask me a bunch of questions over there. So I now and then I put across polls, I put across questions to hear from people what they want. So a little bit of user research over there as well. But I knew most of the problems myself because I sort of see that on a day-to-day basis online. So it took around almost 2 months for me to actually put together the entire structure. It was almost 80% done. I decided that I would go ahead and make it a website, make it like a gated section so that you need a login credentials to get in so that I can control it very well. The initial idea was to make it in Framer, but Framer isn't ready for gated content yet. And then Webflow came in right in the right at the right time, and they said, okay, now memberships is now open for anybody. It's still in beta, but it's in public beta. And I thought, okay, this is the best chance, so I can go to make use of this opportunity. They have payment integrations. They've done it pretty well, sending out emails, access control, user groups. It's pretty great. And I decided this is the way to do it. It took me around 2 to 3 weeks to actually build the entire thing in Webflow. It is quite hard. It's not just a landing page. It's a lot of pages. It's quite hard, I would say. But yeah, I did it.
You've got some crazy stuff in that landing page, and I think we can discuss that separately a little bit later on as well. To talk a little bit about how you did and how you approached it. You talked about not choosing for an ebook, for example, because then the information would be set in stone, right? And if you say that, you can't really. Are you thinking of this in a way that you will also update it and build upon it, the framework that you build now?
Yes, definitely. There are a lot of things I plan to add in the future. Definitely, a lot of people have been asking me, is there something for senior designers, right? How do they go from junior designers who are actually good with all the skills and now they want to go senior? And I think that sort of content more focuses on communication, soft skills, tackling problems in work, how to upskill, grow your career, and all of those things. So I'm not going to talk about Figma and design skills for those type of people. It's more written content or verbal content or audio content. So that is in the future. Probably next year I'll focus on that. But yeah, this is something that will be the go-to place for anybody who wants to become a product designer, but has the time and effort to put in the work and take accountability and responsibility to do it. This is definitely not spoon feeding, because this is not a course. This is not a boot camp of any sort. I will not be there to tell you where you're going wrong all the time. I made sure that the framework, the things that I talk about, the exercises that I give are things that you can learn on your own. You can figure out mistakes on your own. It's okay if you don't become 100% great. At least if you move from 20% to 80%, that's fine. You don't have to be 100%. And all the exercise files that I've made, all the YouTube videos that I've made specifically for these are very detailed. I've put in so much time and effort trying to cover every edge case, every possible thing. So yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to see in a few months how people have received it. Is it helpful? If not, then maybe there's something more that I can do. So I will keep updating it.
Yeah, I think, to learn a new framework, it's almost necessary to include exercises and to start doing it, right? Because when you start doing it, you get that muscle memory and you can apply it to other projects. So what kind of exercise can people expect with this framework? Can you tell a little bit about the things that you included?
Yeah, so there are basically, there are multiple modules over here. Each module focuses on a different aspect of a product designer's life. One is introduction. The other one, a lot of them, one of it goes into actually the core skill of designing in Figma. Then we have a couple of other ones where you actually figure out how to get jobs, how do you make a decision, should you start with internships, how do you select companies, how to validate, how to get feedback. And then the other ones are going to go into more about how do you sustain in this industry, what is it that you have to do after you get a job, right? So it's different aspects. But I think most of the people here would be interested in the module where I go into like Figma and the core skills. So because that's where all the exercise files are. So I was sort of split that into 4 different topics, I would say. The first one is to really understand the core fundamentals of UI design. And what core fundamentals is, if I ask you to design a screen, you need to be able to design a screen in such a way that you can easily hand that off to a developer, which means you need to know how to make the components. You need to know what the components are called. You need to know what is the difference between the material design and the human interface guidelines. You need to know when to use what component. It's just not colors and font sizes and type scales and stuff. So the first chapter goes into taking a complex screen and redesigning it exactly how the designer of that company would have designed, or at least as close to that. So I've prepared an entire exercise file. I've taken an example so that people can refer to it and see how I would have done it. So that's one. So these are the very technical things. The second one goes into more about you developing your visual hierarchy. Now, this is where I ask people to redesign a screen. And it's not just making it beautiful and making it nice. The screen has to make a lot of sense. It needs to solve a problem. It needs to have an objective. And how do you know that this screen is correct? How do you know this screen is solving the problem? So for that, you have to set a context about what is the objective of this app, what is the screen used for, how is this going to impact the business and the user, stuff like that. And then the third one, which I will be launching next week, I just wrapped up the Figma file this week, which is taking a tiny problem statement and then building an entire user flow. And it's not just putting together 5-6 screens to build a user flow. It's more about thinking of edge cases, thinking of how do you handle technical difficulties, thinking about interaction design. So the example that I've taken is where so the place where I live, there's a shared laundry room where you have a mobile app and you can sort of reserve a washing machine, and then you put in your clothes and then you wash it and then you pay money and all of those things, right? Now, this might be a simpler flow, but then when you actually look at the Figma file, it is quite complex because there are edge cases to solve. I've redesigned the app as well, so it looks much better. There are technicalities, so a lot of the things, right? And then I also talk about metrics. How do you know that this user flow is correct and things like that? And I think these are the three main things people have to focus on. You also learn about design patterns over here. How do you read and understand from the design guidelines? I've seen a lot of people who are designers even today, but have never completed reading the material design or human interface guidelines. I'm like, that is not possible. Like, this is your Bible. You have to know this. You need to know pretty much everything about it. And then the last one goes into building your case study, picking a good problem statement. And the reason I've put across this framework is because most of the bootcamps and courses that I see online, they make you start working on your final problem statement right from the beginning, which makes no sense. I'm like, that is such a monumental task. There are so many things that you need to learn and develop before you give them an entire app to redesign or an entire app to design. And everybody does it wrong because it's very obvious. When you're learning cooking, you start with something small. You don't start baking a cake on day one. Doesn't make sense. You need to get your fundamentals of cooking right. So that's the way I've put it across. And to be very honest, this is the way I learned it. And I'm sure that of all the people that I've mentored, that is the same framework that I've taught them, and they have become great designers. So I know that this is tried and tested and it will work. So yeah, that's what people can expect.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think very interesting. So it basically comes down to deconstructing things, right? Redesigning things. And lastly, then you are ready to start creating stuff yourself because you know how others did it by dissecting, good work, looking into, okay, how was this made and why was it made that way? That's really interesting. Talking about how something was made, maybe we can take a look at the website that you created for Learnproduct.design. So maybe you can share your screen or, where we can take a look a little bit about what you created. Is that an idea?
Yeah. I'll probably start off with the landing page itself, the final landing page, and then I'd probably take you to Figma.
Because you got some crazy motion effects in there as well with the typography. It's almost like you're watching an intro to a movie.
Okay.
Maybe in the meantime, we've got a question. Luan, go ahead.
Hey guys, nice to talk with you.
Hello.
Hello, Chita. Yeah, man, I got a question in the meanwhile. How do you manage to get at Apple?
That's a big question. Yeah.
No, but I know you can't talk too much about what stuff you did like that. You mentioned that already, but it's like how you, like a self-taught person without being on courses online, get so much knowledge to get at that level of company?
Got it. Cool. So I think, to be very honest, it's I think what worked out for me was that I first of all, I had a lot of skills that I already had, which was not product design before, because I knew motion design, I knew visual design, I knew a lot of other skills, graphic design and things back then. So that was something that I already had in my skill set. Now that gave me like an extra push, but that's not what got me the job. The second thing is, I think the first company that I worked at, Unacademy, I worked there for a year and a half before I moved to Apple. I think that's where I learned quite a lot about product design. And not everybody gets this opportunity. I was lucky, and I had put in the time and effort to actually, work pretty hard to get into that company, because it's not an easy company to get into. It's one of India's biggest startups. It's a huge edtech startup, so it's not easy to get in there. And I think once I got in there, I just learned quite a lot. I got to work on multiple projects. I worked on app projects. I worked on web projects. So I think it's just that I got to learn from the best people. I got to understand what is product designers, and it's not just design. It's working at a good company that values design. I think that is also something very important. At Trade Republic, the reason I chose Trade Republic is because they give design the most importance, and the next importance is engineering. Engineers are required to design what we do, and we are very strict about design. It's a very design driven company, just like how Apple is. So I think when you work at a company like that, design gets so much importance, and everybody focuses on good design and solving problems. So I think because of that, it enabled and empowered me to gain a lot of skills. And I think Apple saw some potential in me, and then they took me in. And I would say this to a lot of people: the first few stages of your career are extremely important. The first 3 years, extremely important. And I think if you get that sorted, then you'll be successful for the rest of your life, and you'll never have to worry about layoffs or not getting interviews and stuff like that. So yeah. I know it was a long answer, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah, nice. Thank you, man.
Yep. Cool.
What? Maybe a quick follow up, Chetan.
Okay.
What would you say makes the first years of your career successful? What do you think, if you would give some advice on those first years? What would that be from your perspective?
I think the thing is, I would say the first year is that try to get as much feedback as you can. That is something that I see a lot of people lacking in, either because they're too scared, or either because they don't work in a company that's giving them, and they just feel that feedback is something that's always negative. The thing is, like in your entire life, in your career, you will have to take feedback. That is going to be your daily job. So you have to make it a habit. You have to get used to it, even if you don't like it. Even I don't like it sometimes, but I need it for me to grow. I need it. It's something you can never live without. And feedback you're going to get every single day from 100 people across the room. And you need to know how to handle it. You need to know how to make use of it. You need to know what to take in, what not to take in. There's an entrepreneur in India. He's the owner of a very big fintech company called Cred. And he does a lot of interviews, and he said this one line. A lot of youngsters in India and across the world are scared to take risks, because they fear they will lose their reputation when they have no reputation. And I think that is very powerful, because you need feedback to get that reputation. So if you don't have any reputation, what are you scared about? What are you worried about? Just go get feedback. And if you end up working in a great company, there's so much that you can learn. So I would say, try to get into a company. It's fine if your first company isn't a great company, but at least you will learn a few things over there, pick up a lot of the skills on the sides, and then get into a really good company where design is very much valued. That is the most important thing. And I speak about this in the guide, where I say your career doesn't start when you get a job. Your career starts when you get into a job where you get to learn and grow. Right. So before Unacademy, I worked at a very small company for 4 months, and I don't even consider it as a part of my experience because I didn't learn anything over there. I stayed there for 4 months, didn't learn anything, and then I decided this is not working out. So I picked up a couple of skills by learning things on the side, and then I got into an academy, and that's when my career really took off. That's my biggest and most important advice that I can give anybody.
Great advice. All right. So we've got the landing page in front of us.
Yes.
Yeah. Just go ahead. Maybe walk through it and tell us a little bit about your thought process and how you approached it.
Got it. So when I started, this definitely was not the first iteration. I can take you through the Figma file later. But then when I was thinking about the hero copy in the beginning, my most important thing was, what is it that makes this guide stand out from everything else? I think that was the most important thing for me, right? So what is different than the other things is the way I'm teaching design. So learn product design the way it is meant to be learned is the most important thing. So that was the intent, and I've thought a lot about the storytelling aspect of this as well, which I'll take you through. There's also a promo video that gives you more insight into what product design is and why I'm creating this. And so then a quick context, this is the ultimate guide to become the designer the industry wants. My objective is to not to make you any product designer. My objective is to make you the product designer that the industry wants. Right. So what is that the industry wants? I will teach you all of that. Right. And then this was like the most interesting, fun thing. Apple does this a lot on their website. So I wanted to try it. I've seen a lot of Webflow websites do it. So I thought, let me do it. So the idea is that it says match the industry standard by learning with a no-nonsense and practical framework, right? That was the idea. And then it's more about who is this guide for. So if you're unable to learn design, you're unable to get your job, or you're unable to progress in your career, maybe because there are gaps, then this is the guide for you. And then I get into what is this guide contain, 30 chapters, information over here. And then these are all the modules. So there are 5 modules, and each of them cover a different aspect. And then a couple of things to end it off. So you get Figma files. I will be regularly updating it, real examples. And then you can take this in your own time and consume it as much as you want. There's no deadline, there's no timeline. How much ever time you have, you can put across for that. And then I just ended it saying learn product design like never before, because I've not seen a single course or a YouTube channel online that teaches the way I decided to teach. So there was another way to end it as well. The other web pages are quite straightforward. These has all the chapters. The first 3 chapters are free to access, so it gives you an insight of what this is about. Basically, pieces of the puzzle. I wanted to have some sort of a symbol to it. It's not just a course. Product design is about connecting pieces of the puzzle and filling in those gaps so that you get to look at the big picture. So that was the metaphor I wanted to put across. I'll talk about the triangles in a bit and how that came in. Then the second one is, how do you learn from this guide? And the third one is a bit about my story. And then once you get access, you can then check out the other parts of the thing as well. I'm still releasing a couple of them. This is the most important one for a lot of people, I believe. This one is going to come out next week. That's about it. Unless there's anything else you want to see.
Well, if we go back to the homepage, what I liked about it when I scrolled through it is that it's telling a story without all of these huge blocks of text, but you're really just highlighting the key points and showcasing that in an interesting way. I thought was pretty clever. In that mixed section where you said, Apple's doing this as well quite a lot, right? With the presentation, for example. How did you approach this in Webflow? Is this a video where you scroll through, or are these separate frames? How did you do it?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So this is these are separate frames. So the way I did it was it's quite complex. First, I animated this entire thing as a video file in After Effects. So this was animated from scratch. It was a video file. And once I made the video, I then exported it as frames. So then I got a PNG sequence, so each individual frame. And then I imported those frames into After Effects again. And then I used Lottie to create the Lottie file. So basically, this is not a video. It's not this is a Lottie file. It's not even like an image.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then you bring in the Lottie file into Webflow. and then you use the scroll animations to animate it. It's quite straightforward. The tricky part here was to match, the timing, match, the whole thing getting stuck on the screen. I had to watch a few tutorials and try to sort of figure out how to do it. I spent almost 2 days on this. It was very complex. I have a video coming on this next month, so I'll sort of show exactly how I did this on my channel. But yeah, and I think it has this very cinematic feel. Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. How did you go about, branding this and setting up a visual direction for it?
Yeah, I think I can probably go into Figma and then show you that. I think that would be cool.
Because it got this dark theme going on, of course. Were you by any chance inspired by Linear?
I mean, yeah. It always is. Everybody is. So dark theme. So that's sort of my specialty. A lot of people know me for that. To be very honest, that was also one of the reasons I got into Apple. I wrote an article about dark mode and I made a few Instagram posts, and that's when Apple got to know about it and they reached out to me and they said, hey, we saw this, you seem to be like a guy who's interested in like iOS design and stuff. Let's have a chat. So that's how actually it started for me. So I've always been a dark mode fan. And I just understand it very well, and I know how to design dark mode. So I always knew it should be this because it sort of represents my identity as well in a way. So that was that. So in the beginning, like I said, I wanted it to depict this concept of puzzles, right? So in the initial stages, I created these things and I tried to put them together. But then over a period of time, I realized that this looks like a child's book or some sort of a toy, right? It doesn't show premiumness. It doesn't show anything. So I wanted to find something that brings in the sense of pieces of the puzzle together. And to be very honest, for a long time, I had no idea. I was completely blank. But then I just let it go and I thought that I'll pick that up later. These are just a few screenshots that I got. I used some of these. I didn't use some of these. There are a lot more that I didn't take. I would just take inspiration just by looking at the website. So here we have Frame.io. They did a pretty good job. So that's there. And a lot of these sections. I had a couple of copy ideas as well as how do I want to sell this. And I was just iterating quite a bit. I then started off with like an overall website structure, very top level, nothing too fancy, nothing too crazy about all of this. And then to be honest, this is what I started with. I just put a plain text on this, and I didn't want to use Satoshi because everybody is using that. And I used I used Figtree, which was quite new and looked very well, and it's a free font as well. So I thought, let me be the first set of people to use it. So this is what I started with, and I spent almost like 3-4 days just on the top section, and the first few sections. I was like, I don't know how to proceed. I'm very confused. I'm not getting any ideas. I tried to gather a couple of screenshots, change the copy. I didn't like any of this. I was like, this is too easy. Anybody can do this. It has to be different. And that's when, after a couple of iterations, I decided that, okay, let's split this into 2 lines. One is learn product design. That is the core thing. And then let's give the second level emphasis because I want this to be like the core thing. And then the way it's meant to be learned. I wanted to use triangles in the beginning. I knew it would be some sort of a shape, but I didn't know what. So far, just use this. Now, obviously, the design looks much different than this. And then I was just trying to figure out what is the story? What is it that I want to say? How should the animations be? And every time I came across something online, I would probably, just make a link of it so that I would reference it when building it in Webflow. The file is quite messy, to be very honest. And this is something that I knew that I would have that Apple zoom in Lottie animation. So I was just putting everything together. A lot of times it became very text heavy. And then I just kept moving on when I realized that, I don't want this. I had something like this before, but this felt very easy. I mean, the moment I felt it was too easy to design, I would just ignore that iteration. And I'm like, no, anybody can do this. I need to try something different.
So something I see a lot of Webflow designers, if you can call them that, doing is that they use Figma in a way where they do a rough sketch. And when they start building it in Webflow, they actually start iterating also in
Yes.
Webflow, right?
Yes. Yep.
Because in Figma, it's just to set a direction, but they are
Yep.
not going to make it pixel perfect, or not every section is completely thought out. It's more to set
Correct.
a direction.
Yep.
Is that also how you approach your projects in Webflow?
Yeah, part of it was, I knew that there were certain things I couldn't visualize here. For example, this part, the way it's animated, I can't do that in Figma. So I just put in text over here. I knew this is how it would look, but the visual direction and the motion, I had already built that in my mind. So I knew how I wanted it. So here even these sizes, they are quite random. I just felt what was nice because I knew that I need to get into the pixel level stuff when I do it in Webflow. That's how I've always been designing websites if I build it in Webflow. Here I wanted to show the chapters, but then this became too text heavy. I know Shift Nudge also does it partially like this, so I wanted like a different direction. So I kept going forward. I wanted to have this bevel and emboss effect, because that's something that's quite interesting. Never done that before. So I would see how can I do this in Webflow as well. So that was interesting. I think what I had the most, I even made this stuff which was too text heavy, and I'm like, nobody is going to read this. This is not, this is ridiculous. So I wanted to have like a better way. So that's when I came across this dribble shot on Dribble, and I'm like, okay, this is very interesting. I can put this together as pieces of the puzzle, and that's what I can use as my entire brand identity. This triangle. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle, but then it's not really the traditional jigsaw puzzles, but it's shapes, and then you put all of them together. So I spent some time making this in Figma here with gradients and then inner shadows and stuff. And then I made like components and stuff with all of these component properties, and
that's pretty cool.
And then I wanted a logo, so then I just decided putting all of these together, it would become like the logo. I even initially had this idea of these lines zooming across, but then I just felt it's too distracting and it's a bit of an overkill. So I just didn't go with that. I changed the button style to make it very simpler as well. So here for the chapters section, I came across this where I thought I would animate this depending on the chapter, but then this created a problem because I can't scale this. I can't add more chapters. I can't reduce it, and it's just too much of an effort. So I decided not to go with this, and I kept it very simple and just use numbers. I think that was simple and straightforward. Different colors for everything. And then I just started putting together every single thing. I used a lot of radial gradients here to focus on the keyword. That's something that I was very careful about. So it's sort of like a spotlight effect so that it focuses your attention on that. What else? So the landing page itself took almost 2 to 3 weeks to design, get feedback from my friends, get their opinions. And then that's when I started moving on to the other chapters. Like, I wanted to have a navigation bar in before, but then I removed that. And then I just came up with a chapter section and all of these things, hover effects and all of those things I had to. So even the hover effects and how that would look, I sort of did that while I was in Webflow. I hadn't thought of it here yet. But this metallic premium feel, triangles, and then accent colors only where it is required was the sort of minimal look I came with. Even though it has a lot of elements and it is 3D and it has this skeuomorphic effect and stuff like that, it is still quite minimal and premium, I feel. It was like a lot of effort. It took me 3 weeks to design and then another 2-3 weeks to build it in Webflow, and then make it responsive and then test it on all devices and animate it. It was it was pretty crazy.
You have a vast amount of iterations as well. I see, but thanks for walking through it and showing us how you actually approach this. Luan, you've got another question. Go ahead.
Just a quick observation before my question. You said you were looking for use like a pieces of a puzzle, but you use it indeed, because this kind of shapes you use like in triangle, it's called a tangram.
Yeah,
Do you know
tangrams.
that?
Yeah, I know.
Tangram.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
Chinese
tangram.
puzzle.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was perfect. You're still using a pieces of puzzle.
Yeah.
So yeah, my question, man, is I don't know nothing about product design yet. I
Okay.
hope to learn. I hope to learn from you. But can we expect in your course learn this kind of stuff you did on your website, or is just too far from product design? All those iterations, these like this framework, those effects,
Yeah.
or they're not related to product design itself.
So, if you were a product designer and you worked at a company, you will not be required or asked to do stuff like this. There's going to be a marketing team. There's going to be a visual designer who's probably going to handle all of that. So you will never, very rarely, be required to design a landing page. If you are, then it's probably a small company and they don't have enough resources. But if you take a definition of a product designer, this is not our job. Deciding the brand identity is not our job. We have a say in it, but then there's a specialized team that sort of takes care of it typically. Right? I'm not saying this is how all companies work. But the principles and the concepts and everything, the process of iterating, the process of making decisions, the process of rejecting concepts is still something that we all do on a daily basis. We just do it with user interface and colors and components and interactions and patterns and stuff. So in hindsight, the thought process and the idea is the same, but the output is very different. So in my course, I will not talk about websites, not landing pages at least, but definitely interfaces where you're designing dashboards or web-based products and things like that. That is something that I will still probably cover. No plans of it as of now, but I don't see a reason why I can't add it. But landing pages is something that I will not cover because that's a very visual skill set. It's not really critical thinking or problem solving as such. You are still solving problems. For example, storytelling, all of that is in a way solving a problem for a user who is trying to understand what this is about. But that's not our core skill. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, man.
Very nice. All right. We are already almost an hour in. So I just want to ask if there are any other questions from, people that tuned in. If not, I've got one more fun question for you, Shetana. That's what's the thing in design currently that you're most excited about?
Wow. What's currently that I'm most excited about?
New developments in design. What's currently happening in the industry? What are the things that you are most excited about either learning or getting into?
Okay. I think we are finally coming to a stage where AI is sort of coming into our lives. But I am honestly not scared of AI taking over my job because we are still far, far away from that happening. One thing that I'm seeing very common here is design systems. I think that's getting picked up quite a lot and it's becoming a lot more serious. And I think that's a skill. That's a skill that everybody has to pick up. It's a core competency. It's not easy. It is extremely hard. I thought it was easy. I thought it was just about components and stuff, but it's not. It's way more complex than that. So that is interesting for me. New advancements and developments. I'm just fascinated by the tools that are there, and it's nice to have this. I think I'm now focusing a lot about products rather than design now. I'm just thinking about what sort of products are coming out in the market, what sort of problems are they solving. And I watch Shark Tank quite a lot. So it's very fascinating for me. And I try to be the judge myself and try to judge whether the pitch was nice. Is this a scalable business? If I was a shark, what questions would I answer? I think I'm sort of focusing and aligning on that. And being an Indian coming from India is a developing country, and we are doing pretty crazy in a lot of products. So I see new products coming out every single day. Design is picking up. So I think designers are going to be very much valued in the future. We are already, but it's got I think one thing that I would really want is for companies to take design seriously, like everybody. all companies, whether you just like a 5-employee company or a 100-employee company or a 10,000-employee company. Companies are now starting to value design a lot more. Also because it's an influence that's coming from the Western culture, but nevertheless, it is helping us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I think, for example, if you talk tools, Figma already did it, right? Because I can't imagine myself sending a Photoshop file to a manager a few years back, right?
Yeah.
And expecting them to do something in it. And now you can basically send anyone your design work and they can just jump in and give their feedback. And I think that's already one of the examples of, where design is heading, taking away the barriers of entry, but also taking away all of the tedious tasks. I think will more and more become automated, right? Where we can focus on more important stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Which I personally really enjoy as well. Yeah, really cool. Well, first of all, thanks everyone for joining and tuning in. Chetan, as said, we will share the links, right? People can already take a look at the first 3 chapters for free if they're interested in your course. Thank you so much for talking design with me and walking through your Webflow project and stuff like that. Really great stuff.
Thank you so much.
And stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys. Have a great day.
See you.